Hello everybody, this is John the Bike Guy coming to you again, and you might be wondering what it is I have going on here. I got this weird interesting thing that doesn't look anything like a derailleur, but I have this that does look like a derailleur. We're going to be talking about rear derailleurs and how to hook up shifters and basically understand how it all works so that you can adjust them yourself and be a pro at it, alright? And let's get started. Okay, let's get started with this contraption thing that I've made. And what I've tried to accomplish is recreate a simple, understandable derailleur that anybody can figure out. Okay, and that's basically every derailleur. To me, at least, it's just a simple device. And this is a simple device. So what we have here functions like any other derailleur. We have cable being pulled by the shifter, and it causes movement side to side. We have a stop that keeps it from going too far. We have a spring like this that pulls it back once cable is released. And we have another stop that keeps it from going too far the other way. And that's all a derailleur is. It is that simple. Okay, let's start on our grand tour of shifting systems, all right? We're going to start with the rear derailleur. And in it, there are two things you need to know. They're just simple devices. They are totally brainless. They just do what the shifters tell them to do. What they do is they get cable pulled in and released, and that translates into side-to-side movement. And any derailleur, there's at least one adjustment you can make, and those are the derailleur stops. Okay, we're going to get into that next. And if you have a barrel adjuster equipped on your derailleur, this one doesn't have one, you have cable tension adjustment on this too. So let's move on to derailleur stops. Okay, now on to derailleur stops. And you might have noticed I've disconnected this thing, oh no, but that's to prove a point. This is to show that your derailleur stops do not depend on your cable. They are just objects that your derailleur hits and keeps them from moving. They can be adjusted in or out, obviously. So if this was further out, it would keep it from going that far. If it was in, it could allow it to go further. You have two of them. This is your low stop. This is for your big cog right here. All right, we have our H1 that hits here, limits travel that way. All right, so I can show you them here. That's really easy to see on this derailleur. They have two screws, and you can see by moving them in or out, that can change how far they're allowed to travel. So when your derailleur is in normal operation, they're usually not touching. But once it gets to a certain point, this is your H screw. It hits and it limits travel and doesn't allow the derailleur to keep going that way. And this one, this is your L screw. It keeps it from going too far out this way. All right. And those are your derailleur stops. And let's move on to my little sheet here. Okay. Derailleur stops. Used for limiting the travel of the derailleur either on the smallest cog or the largest cog, using the H or L screw respectively. It keeps your chain from falling off. You do not want to touch these if your derailleur already travels to where you want it to. If they're perfectly fine, don't touch them. Leave them alone. They're not going to help you shift from 4th to 5th gear any better. Just leave them alone. Reasons to adjust them: you just bought a new derailleur, not going to be set right. They weren't properly adjusted initially. Anytime the relationship between the rear derailleur and the cassette is moved, like by putting a new wheel on, a new cassette, you put spacers for some weird reason, or you straighten the hanger that was bent and you had your derailleur adjusted to that bent hanger and now you fixed it, something like that. So that is derailleur stops. Okay, let's talk about shifters. Shifters are the brains of the operation. They tell the derailleur what to do. What they do, they can have two functions. They can either let cable out or they can pull cable in. When they're pulling cable in, they move to the larger cogs and rear, the lower gears. All right, when they let cable out, they're going to move towards the smaller cogs, the bigger gears. All right, and the only adjustment, if you have one on these, is a barrel adjuster to adjust cable tension. Okay, this is an indexed shifter. It has so many clicks in it. This has 11 speeds, so it's going to have 10 clicks in it. And each time one of these clicks happens, it's going to move. It's going to pull enough cable to move the distance, your derailleur, the distance of one cog from here to here. And it's made to be the equidistant throughout, so it travels from here to here to here. There is no changing it. This is set to this spacing here. If you don't have an 11-speed cassette, sorry, it's not going to work on a 10-speed. It's going to pull so much to go from here to here to here. It has chapters like a book. Okay, you can't change the chapters of the book. They are fixed, so you can't adjust that. Only thing you can adjust is cable tension. So when we look at this, okay, I'm going to be pulling cable in because I'm going to go to these big cogs on the left, these lower gears, all right? Cable's getting pulled in. You can see the cable getting pulled that way. And it's going to move the derailleur that way, okay? The derailleur gets forced by this cable. It has to go this way, all right? Now I'm going to release the cable, and what causes this to go back is this spring right here. So it's going to let out the cable. Boom. That spring is going to pull it back into place, and you can see the cable's being let out like that. Okay? And that's how a shifter works. It's pretty simple. Pull cable in, pull cable out along specified tracks, distances. Okay? Okay, we're on our last stop of the anatomy of a shifting system. We are at barrel adjusters. They're actually a very, very important thing to know because this is how your shifting system will work great. All right, so it can be found in many places. It can be found on the shifter if you have one. It could be found on the derailleur. This one doesn't happen to have one, but you can find them on derailleurs. Sometimes you can find them on the frame where you can reach it, like a road bike. You can reach down and then turn it, so you can adjust it while you're riding. Sometimes you won't have anywhere. You won't have one on the shifter, a derailleur, or on the frame, and sometimes you can put one inside the line. You cut the housing and put one in there, and you can turn it to adjust your cable tension. Okay, so they work in two ways. By turning it clockwise, it decreases cable tension. Let's get our little pointer here. As cable tension increases, it goes that way. As the cable tension decreases, it goes that way. So I'm turning it counterclockwise. Oh, it's going that way. So that means cable tension is being decreased. So I'm going to turn it counterclockwise. You can see cable tension getting better, greater. It's going that way. So how it really works is that the cable inside is a fixed length. All right, the housing can be changed by using this. So by turning this counterclockwise, it makes this part longer. The part on the inside stays the same. So when I make this longer, tension builds and it moves that way. Okay, this gets sucked in, and that's how a barrel adjuster works. So to remind you, when I turn it clockwise, it decreases cable tension, lets cable out. When I turn it counterclockwise, it increases cable tension, sucks cable in. Okay? Okay, now we're actually going to be starting with how to adjust your shifting system now. Okay, now we're going to focus on the derailleur stops. Okay, we have two screws, like I said before. Okay, the ideal position of each stop is to allow it to travel just a little bit past the cog. Okay, so when this pointer is pointing at something, that refers to this first pulley, this right here. Okay, it comes off your cassette, your chain does, and it goes around here. Okay, so this is directly underneath that cog. When it's pointing to this thing, it is directly underneath your cog. Okay, all right. So that's basically how it works. So if it's right here, and that's as far as it can go, you're never going to get to the 11th cog. So what you need to do is to adjust it so that it can go to it and maybe just a slight tidge back, okay, past it, okay? So that's your H screw. Okay, now we're going to go to the other one. You know, if it can only go here, you're never going to get that big cog, okay? If this is hitting on here, you're not going to get there. If it goes past it, boom, it's off the wheel, off the cassette, into your wheel, ruining your spokes, and we don't want that to happen. So what we need to do is turn this out so that it allows you to at least get to it, and maybe just a little bit beyond, because when you're shifting, it goes up and past and then goes back, okay? All right, so I'm going to set these at the right distance right now. So I'm going to cheat and turn it off. See how far I can go. I'm going to turn this out. Just like that, and maybe I'll fast forward this so you don't have to watch me do it. Okay, all right, so you probably just watched the fast forwarded version. Okay, so now I have it set so that it's just a little bit past and a little bit beyond, okay? You might notice I had this disconnected. That makes it a lot easier to adjust your derailleur stops because you can physically move it by hand without actually having to use the shifter. And plus the shifter has fixed movements and you can't really tell how far it's going to go because the shifter won't tell it to go there. Only unless you force it to go there with your hand can you actually see it. So this one is pretty easy to see because the spring pulls it back. Okay, that does it for this part. All right, now that you bore with me all that time, now we get to actually start working on adjusting your shifting, okay? Now you have all the terminology down and the concept of how everything works. So, now we're gonna start with actually physically attaching your cable to your derailleur. Okay, make sure your housing is in all the little things, you know, that's step number one. Otherwise you're just gonna be eating up slack later trying to getting that out once it actually does get in there. And this part's very important. Your derailleur is going to naturally fall to the smallest cog and back because the spring's going to pull it there. You know, you turn the crank, it's going to go there. All right? So your shifter has to be in the same position as well. So if you took it off when it was in this gear, there's going to be cable sucked in that we need to get rid of. So we're going to need to release that. So pull it so that all the cable gets let out. There's no more clicks, that's all there is. So now I know that this shifter is in this gear because your derailleur's in that gear. This has to be there. Your friends want to be together. All right, so what I'm going to do is make sure that my barrel adjuster is turned in all the way, just like that. All right, now what I do is turn it all the way in clockwise. I had to specify. Now I need to turn it out maybe 1 or 2 turns counterclockwise because your shifter is only going to, your cable never gets shorter, it only gets longer, and this stretches, you know, quite a bit, especially if it's a brand new cable, it's going to stretch right away. So we need to have enough in here to adjust. All right, so we are going to actually attach it in here. I'm going to pull it tight, get it in there first if I can. All right, so there we go. Make sure it's in these things. I'm going to tighten it down, lock it in place. All right, now it's in place. Okay, and now we are going to move on to my foolproof method on how to get you 95% of the way there from here. Right. Sorry, one more stop before we get to my easy foolproof method. We have to understand that your shifter has specified points where it can move the pointer to, you know? And you see they're not always kind of, you know, lining up. I can make it worse, you know. See, they're not really lined up anymore. That means you're not shifting well. Okay? So, what I need to do is line up your jockey wheel directly underneath each one of the cogs. So it's directly underneath if I'm looking from the back. So if I shift it to a 1, it's directly underneath. And that's what this thing symbolizes here. When this pointer's pointing to number 11, it's directly underneath. If it's pointing to number 10, it's directly underneath. It's not halfway. It's not, you know, a quarter of the way. It's directly underneath, okay? And that's all we're doing when we're setting up a shifter. We're just lining up the shift points. Your cogs can't move anywhere. They're fixed in one location. But we can change the shift points to be in the right spot to line up with those cogs. And that's all we're doing when we're adjusting shifting. All right, now on to my foolproof method on how to do this. This is going to get you almost all the way there. I'm going to screw with this a little bit so it doesn't make any sense anymore. Okay, now what we're concentrating on is moving from this to this. We don't care about the rest of these right now. From here to here. From here to here. Okay? Your derailleur is naturally going to be in this position, if your stops are set correctly, to go here because the spring is going to pull it there. It has no choice but to be there. All right? So, what I'm going to do is I'm going to get direct, just on my bike, I'm going to start turning the crank, and I'm going to hit this shifter and see what it does. If it gets there, great. If it doesn't, you know, it doesn't matter. So, all right, so it didn't quite get there. So what I'm going to do is I'm standing by my bike. I saw that it moved, you know, from here to not quite all the way there. See if I can get that underneath so you guys can see it. So I went from here to not quite all the way there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get my bike. I'm not even going to turn anything, any cranks or anything like that. I'm just going to get behind, and I'm going to turn the barrel adjuster wherever it has, if it's on the derailleur, if it's on the shifter. I'm going to turn the barrel adjuster one way or the other. If it went past, you know, that's another thing. We're just going to line it up so that this jockey wheel falls directly underneath the second cog, okay? If it didn't get here, if it's in this position where it's a little bit to the right, we're standing behind the bike. If it's a little bit to the right, we're going to turn your barrel adjuster counterclockwise. If it went too far, we're going to turn your barrel adjuster clockwise to get it to move back here. And we're going to be able to physically see it move when we're turning this barrel adjuster. So you're going to see it. So you're going to just turn it whichever way, even if it doesn't make sense, counterclockwise or counterclockwise. Just turn it so that this goes so it's directly underneath. And that's what I'm going to do right here. I'm just going to turn this so this thing lines up with number 10. Okay? Now I'm going to turn it back to number 11. Shifter, your chain's going to fall back, you know, turn your cranks. Okay, now turn your crank and we're going to shift to number 10. It should go up there now. Okay, now we're 95% of the way done. And now that this one's pretty much lined up, all the rest are going to be pretty much lined up because this is on an index system and it doesn't have any choice but to be lined up with all the rest. Pretty simple, huh? Okay, now we're going to move to the bike now. I can't show you the last step to get you that last 5% unless we're actually on the bike. All right, so goodbye board, meet you at the bike. Okay, now we're actually on the bike away from the board. If you're not concerned about your derailleur stops, you can skip on later to the other part. But right now, you probably might want to check it, you know, if you're concerned about it or whatever, you're putting a new derailleur on. What I recommend is disconnecting this. You know, that's not hard, just disconnect it. You're going to be adjusting your shifting later anyway, so just disconnect it. Helps if you can get rid of the chain too, but if you can't, you know, I understand. But right now, there's no shifter cable connected, and the spring's pulling it all the way as far as it can go. But the derailleur stop is stopping it from going all the way to the right. If it's going too far, that means you don't want to go that far either. So, but right now, it's like directly underneath like the third cog, and we know that's way too far to the left. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn the H screw counterclockwise, because when I turn something counterclockwise, that allows movement towards the outside. When I turn something clockwise, it restricts movement towards the inside. So right now it's not being allowed to move towards the outside, so I'm going to turn it counterclockwise, and I'm going to be standing behind it so I can see it directly underneath. It's hard for you guys to see, this crap's in the way, I'm sorry. But I'm going to turn it and I can see it move. I can see it's just a little bit to the right of my smallest cog here. So I want this jockey wheel, this first jockey wheel, to be just a little bit, maybe like a millimeter beyond to the right. As long as no problems are happening, your chain's rubbing into something, you know, whatever. So I'm going to check this one. You can say, oh no, it's way beyond. It's like a whole cog beyond. It's way too far. So what I'm going to do, like I said before, turn it clockwise restricts the movement towards the center. Turn it counterclockwise restricts it, or pushes it, allows it to go beyond. So it's way too far beyond. So I'm going to turn it clockwise to get it to go. I'm pushing it all the way, and this is why it's nice to have the chain off. So I'm going to turn this clockwise, and you can see, oh, it's moving this towards the center. It's restricting movement towards the center. It's not allowing it to go any farther beyond where I'm pushing it. So right now it's set just about right. So it's about a millimeter beyond. As long as you're not hitting something, you're good. All right, now we're to the point of actually physically connecting this thing to the shifter and derailleur, all this fun stuff. So what I'm going to do is make sure, like I said in the video, that this thing has all the cable let out of it. We want this to be an 11, and this one has to be an 11 because the spring's pulling it there. There's no shifter hooked up to it, so like that. Now remember, turn my barrel adjuster in all the way, which it is. Now turn it back out 2 turns maybe, if that, you know, one's good sometimes. Okay, now we are going to put the cable through, just like that, and go like this. And I'm going to put it through, pull it tight. You don't have to go nuts, you don't pull it with a crazy wrench or anything. Hand tight is good enough, so go like that. There it is. That's that part connected. All right, for those of you who maybe want to check their stops right now, or you adjusted them and you want to check them now too, now's a good time to do it before we actually start shifting. The chain is now connected, so what I'm just going to do is I'm going to turn it, and I can see that it's not making any noise. It's making rubbing noise on the front derailleur, but I can see that it's not falling off on the inside, or it's not hitting the next cog over, you know, and I'm going to push it up physically with my hand. There we go. And I can see it's kind of falling off to the left, to the left on your guys scene. I need to adjust that a little bit. So now's a good time to check it before we actually get the shifter going. You know, so check it. Make sure you're not going too far. Great time to check the stops. Okay, everybody, we're going to the foolproof method right now, okay? We were concerned from going from this cog to that cog, from this cog to that cog. So, I'm going to turn my crank. I'm going to click it once. It didn't go there, not surprisingly. That's because it is not pulling enough cable right now to go that far, and the shift points aren't lined up. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to zoom in if I can to that. You can see that my jockey wheel right here, can you see it? Fingers pointing to it, is not lined up directly underneath that second cog. So what I'm going to do is just turn my barrel adjuster counterclockwise so that it is. That's hard to tell from the camera, so that's pretty close. Oh, it went up, just like that. Now we're 95% of the way there. If your cog, if this jockey wheel went beyond that, we would have turned it clockwise to allow it to travel back. So let's just try this out. We're 95% of the way there, I hope. Oh, look at that. Just by eyeballing it. See how well that worked? Awesome. Now we're going to get on to fine tuning. Okay, now we're on to fine tuning here. You're going to come across one of two possible situations, assuming that your derailleur hanger is nice and straight and playing with the wheel, you know, this up and down and then this way, and your cable is sliding nicely in and out. The exceptions we'll deal with in the next part of the video, but, all right, remember when I had the arrow pointing to those lines on the board? We want to get those shift points lined up exactly right on with this cassette, okay? So, if it's hesitant to go this way, if it's going slowly upwards, but going nice and smoothly downwards, we want to turn our barrel adjuster counterclockwise to increase cable tension to make it faster upwards. If it's doing the opposite, where it's coming down, it's not coming down quickly, but it's going up really nice, that means we turn our barrel adjuster clockwise in just tiny turns. In both these cases, just tiny turns, eighth turns, quarter turns, until we get fine-tuned so that it's going up this way as well as it is going down that way. And on to the problems that we encounter. Okay. Problems, we don't like them at all. Okay, so beyond, you know, normal shifting operations where everything's nice and clean and everything's working great, we do have two problems that can happen. You might be having bad shifting problems because of these. Number one is a bad derailleur hanger. It's bent in, or it's bent that way, so that your derailleur is not perfectly in line with your wheel or your cogs. In that case, you will find that it will not shift good this way or this way at all. As you go through the range, you know, up and down, it just doesn't want to work at all. And it's just really frustrating because you can spend hours and you think it's you and you're sitting there monkeying with it for hours. It's probably because you got a bad derailleur hanger. Straighten it, buy a new one, do whatever you want. Make sure that it's straight. They make a tool for it. The other one is, it always shifts great this way, but it never shifts good this way. No matter how much you adjust it, check your cables. If it's not sliding nicely inside your housing, remember the spring has to override to pull that slack out. And if it's not stronger than the friction that's in your line, it's not going to work. So make sure that your lines are good. So those are the two big problems that I see quite often. All the other ones might be beyond your expertise, but they're very rare and I wouldn't worry about them. So, I'm John. You see my hand. Have a good day, happy riding, and I hope you enjoy my video with me. Thank you.